I've been doing this all this time, but you know what? I'm going to kind of take a little bit of a step back. That's what's happened. But you're going to see now, and you're already seeing it, that with what's been done, and this is just the tip of the iceberg, the amount of excitement that exists and everywhere. I mean, I get called all the time. You would be surprised how many times I get called. I'm just going to tell you this. I work with a lot of attorneys because I'm an attorney, but it's not just because of law. So one of my own attorneys is doing some work for me and knows me very well, said that everybody's calling her because they know that she knows me. And the question was, hey, is this guy John Ruiz really going to do the stadium? And she goes, listen, I know John. You can bet yourself to not say the word ass, but I'm going to say it, that it's going to happen. Um, this is going to happen. I don't care what anybody says. I hate politics. I don't like politicians that say things. This Alberto Carvalho guy, when we talked about, doing something positive for Coral Gables Senior High, he comes out, he says he's not going to do it. And 2 days later, he leaves our city to go to Los Angeles. I mean, what kind of respect do people have for a guy that says something like that and then he leaves you? Listen, guys, we're here to stay. We're the ones that are here day in and day out, and we're the ones that have to fight for our community. And that's the way that I feel about it. And I think that everybody that sees the movement and what's going on, in life, people are always going to try to put you down and say that you can't do things and be negative about it because that's just the way life is. But I think when you really start to look at the movement that is existing now, and when you bring a coach like Mario Cristobal, which I've known for a long time, but I was very, very excited and pleased when I went to the press conference. You could just tell with the way that the guy talks. I mean, he has it in him. So that's what I think. So your question was, how are we going to keep the fan and the attraction? We have that already. It's been the administration that's let us down. And that's what we're here to do, to change and make sure, because I will be the first one to make sure that the administration is behind the entire movement. And they are. I can tell you that, I can't give you details because some things, have to be uh, kind of stay the status quo. But I can tell you because I know a lot of the people that are behind, the university, and they're great people and they're smart people and they think the same way that we do. Um, and when President Foote was there, that's why, there was a lot of push and excitement for all sports. And then there was a downfall, right? And that's why we're basically coming back and rebuilding. So hopefully that answers your question.
Let me
Yeah,
ask a follow up if I may, because I'm sorry. When you
yeah, no
talk
problem.
about the stadium sites, I know I asked Alice this earlier. Uh, are you still bullish on downtown? And is Tropical still the favorite? And also, is Wynwood still in the mix as well?
So I'm going to say this, and then my kids can speak too, because the one thing that I've done, and I'm very blessed because I have 3 kids. They're all very involved. They all graduated from so that's great. But we speak about this day in and day out. And I, that we have all different talents from what we're doing, but we can't do anything without you guys. That's the honest truth. And when you guys reach out to us, it's just more and more encouraging. So there's a lot of things happening that's beyond even the football, but that play into the football. So here's what I can explain to you is I think transparency is always good because I think the motivation behind all of this is extremely important. From my perspective, this is me, and my kids can provide you with their own view of the world. To me, the most important thing, and this may not be what you guys want to hear, is not just the football. To me, and one of the movements that I have, because it's important to me and important to everybody that should be, is I want to make sure we keep drugs and alcohol away from these kids as much as possible. Because when you're that age and you either take a turn to the left or to the right, it makes a difference for the rest of your life. And that is super important. We need to instill that before they get to the University of Miami. So that's one of the movements that I'm very, very focused on. We just made a deal with Formula One to bring Lumency powerboat races to Miami Beach. We are connected with just everything that's going on with Formula One. Ironically, today I spoke to the guy that runs uh, the stadium, the Hard Rock Stadium. That's where Formula One's at. So we're connected to every moving piece in this city in one fashion or another in the county. The most logical place right now, because of all the other things that we as a family would want to see, which involves, the best medical care possible for people, not just for football, but for everybody, because one of the things that I focus on is saving lives. I've always, since I was, as long as I can remember, I've always focused on helping the youth and the elderly. And I consider youth all the way up to maybe 22 years of age, sometimes a little older. And, it starts off in terms of the elderly, whether they have a physical or mental condition, but typically around 60 to 62 years of age, people's mental and or physical capacities start to diminish. And I've always wanted to kind of help because that's where I think I can do things. So I've always told people this: there's three things you can do with money. You can either do bad things, which our family chooses not to do. You could do nothing and be greedy and just keep it for yourself and enjoy it, or you could do good things with it. My election is to do good things with it because that's the way that I think. Tropical Park to me is the most logical right now, simply because of the size and because all of the other adjacent items that we would want to have there. Because it's, and then my kids can tell me the exact size. I know it's over 200 acres, but I don't remember if it's 270 or 217. But it's a very large tract of land. We are already working on with groups, design groups, to put together different projects to go to the powers that be at the county, or and if we have to go to the city to present a very big project to them. So I would say that, at least from my vantage point, the most logical right now, and because of all the COVID testing that's been going on, I had an opportunity to go by Tropical Park and look at the arteries leading up to it. It seems the most logical location. Now, it's not the most logical from you can walk from the school to it, but when you start putting all the pieces together, I think we can bring some of the Jackson centers to Tropical Park. And Jackson is a life-saving, hospital. It's probably one of the best trauma centers in the country. But when you go to it, it's so jam-packed, and it's not the best location, and we need to modernize that. And I think that, together with a football stadium, and having other sports that could be played at Tropical Park, and we're even thinking of building a Formula One racetrack, not for the races, but for practices. We'd be bringing a lot to the community.
Okay, I guess as coach, I'm just following up. I know Dan had a follow up. So in the committee that you guys are forming, um, how do we cultivate back to the community? How do we cultivate those relationships at a younger age, right? Not just before the kid becomes a 4-star, 5-star player.
Absolutely.
How do we
Absolutely.
cultivate? Yeah, how do we cultivate? Like, how do we get kids or families, or because I mean, like we said, we the hotbed. Everybody comes to us for the top player, right? So how do we like how do we get them so fired up that I'm a Kane, regardless of the situation? You know what I mean? Or
So,
that's really what inbred it in me early.
so I do business with Uncle Luke's brother, and I know Uncle Luke. He was here at my house, and he's joined the committee. I love that guy. One of the reasons I love him is because I know he's deeply rooted. He's a good guy. Uh, this is my view. Uh, he's got his heart in the right place. And when I was in law school, he was the guy that was making the movement to protect the First Amendment. So guys like that, and guys in this community that are infiltrated within all the sections of the entire community that we want to reach out to, and getting back to the schools and offering things like one of the players that we spoke to earlier. What type of internships are there? That's how you grow, not just because of football, because people understand that at the end of the day, nobody is perfect. Everybody has problems in their family. Everybody has a medical condition. There's no perfection in this world. And when people start to understand that they're just like the next guy, and that everybody has the same problems, and that we're just trying to help each other, that's the way I think you integrate into the community. So one of the ways that I personally would want to integrate into the community is going back at the lower levels, which I'm in agreement with you on, and start talking to the kids and the parents, because it's when you have that family unit that kids start to understand. And a lot of this happens a lot. There's usually kids pay attention to their parents until they're like 12 or 13, and then they think their parents know nothing. And then they kind of jump back on board when they're 22, 23, 24. That's a critical stage and age. And when you start blending that together and making people understand what the family unit means and how cohesiveness plays a role and a positive factor, that's how you get people out to the games. Because if you have a father and son, or a daughter, or whatever, and I can tell you just from our own family, we used to go to the games together because it was enjoyable. And then one of the things that I've always tried to do, I'm just giving you my own personal experiences. I've always tried to be friends with my kids' friends. Yeah, I'm a lot older, but I don't try to make them feel out of place or pressure them in any way. I try to counsel them as best as I can. I think all those things is what keeps, the community as a unit. And what I've said in interviews when I've been interviewed, if you really think about it, if you got 50,000 people to go to a University of Miami football game and they were all fans, out of those 50,000 people, you may have had a fist fight, in your earlier years with some guy that's also cheering for the same team. You may have had a business disagreement with them. You may have had a disagreement with your cousin or your father, but when you're at that stadium, you're all cheering for the same thing. And I think that's how you keep this together. And I think, we have a lot of it already there. There's not that much that has to be done in the big scheme of things, because we are lucky to have had, a great football team from before. And that obviously carries out through the life of purpose. That's sports.
I actually
Okay,
wanted
great,
to
man. I really appreciate that.
So you
my
either
bad, coach.
you either liked what I told you, or you think I'm totally crazy.
No, I was
Nah,
trying to get back on. I was trying to get the mute button off while I was trying to get it off. My screen went black, but no, I'm saying that's great. Like I said, I think that's where it comes from, because I know as a university we're very unique. It's only, I think, maybe one or two that are very similar to us. Especially like a USC, which is in a major city, private institution. You know, and so I just know that that is one of the biggest challenges, is that we have to be able to get the community involved, because, like I said, I mean, let's talk about it. Even Florida State. Nobody's saying, "Yeah, I'm going to Florida State so I can put on for my city." Right? Nobody's
Of
going to
course,
Florida.
right, because
Right?
they have all
Nobody's going to Florida because I want to put on for Gainesville. You know what I
right.
mean? But like the two players that came on earlier talked about representing their city. And so that's huge for our players. And so in the community is what actually makes up our fan base, probably 90% of the fan base, not the alumni, in my take. You know what I mean? So
Listen, you're spot on, because you got to remember FSU and Gainesville are party schools. People go there because they want to go to college and party during the time that they're in college. Yeah, that's the truth. I mean, the
no,
University
I
of
got
Miami
you.
the University of Miami is not a party town. It's a different world altogether. But you're 100% correct. Go to a football game in Gainesville, and yeah, if you got certain games that are big games, you'll get the alumni out there. But most of the other games, it's just the students. But there's so many students that they can pack a field. At UM, it's a different world. It's a different crowd. There's a lot more things to do
Right.
down here than there is in Gainesville. What? Look, if you start looking at like the Chicago Cubs and the St. Louis Cardinals and all those teams, the reason why people go out there all the time, and I used to travel with my kids because they play baseball as opposed to football, but some of these smaller towns, you go to the minor league games, and they pull more people into a minor league baseball game than the Miami Marlins can. That's a professional team. So when you go around, all of the states in the United States, you got to know what territory you're in, because it's
Correct.
only then that you can make an impact. But I think you're spot on. Um, but again, I wouldn't be concerned about it because I don't think that's the issue that we have. And I think that with just look, I can almost guarantee you this: the first game that the University of Miami plays this coming season at home, the place is going to be jam packed. And they haven't even
Agreed.
played. I mean, they may lose, 67-0, but it's going to be jam packed.
I agree with you 100%. I'm not gonna monopolize the time, but that's
Right.
part of being in the
Well,
city. That's what I said. That's the hardest part.
my first question to you is, are you going to the first game?
I
Okay,
live in
but
Orlando, but I definitely be in the first game. Listen, I grew up in Carroll City, right across the street. I've been to the Orange Bowl, so I'm going. But I totally
so we
agree
got
with you,
one
and that's
fan
why I
already.
brought it up because I know
So we got one fan already.
I'm already there. Listen,
So we got two.
and I know it's tough. Yeah, and the thing is, I know it's tough because the Marlins went through the same thing, right? As soon as they built that stadium, you couldn't buy a ticket. The next year, they were giving tickets away, because everybody wanted to see the new thing, right? And so that's why I say, how do we keep it going? Maybe some years we're not a 10-win team, but we got to keep it going because we're here to
I
support
think the
not just the
Marlins are
university, but
different.
the guys.
I think the
No,
Marlins are
I was just
different.
bringing it up as an example.
Yeah, yeah, but look,
Mhm.
I think the football team still draws more fans than the Miami Marlins. I went to one of the last games of the Miami Marlins, maybe it was, you know, seventh to the last game. It was like being in a desert. It was completely empty. It was depressing, quite frankly. Um,
Mhm.
but I don't think you'll ever see that with because you didn't even see it now that we were kind of like at the tail end. So again, I will reiterate, I don't think that that's ever going to be a problem. And now that Cristobal is here, I think just everybody that I speak with, are just dying for the season to start because they're excited.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
to
thank you.
just to piggyback
Uh,
on both of y'all, what y'all were talking about as far as reaching, the guys 2-3 years down the road, and especially with Mr. Brown here, and we're heavily recruiting his son, and him being a fan. I kind of wanted to ask him while everyone was on, like we talk about this game plan that the University of Miami has always had, and it seems like time and time again this game plan seems to vanish somehow. And whether we're reading it on the boards or reading it on the timeline on tweets, it seems like there was always a hearsay, she say thing, right? We never, as you said, Mr. John Ruiz, got it out the horse's mouth. Mr. Brown, you being a diehard Canes fan, and finally being able to, sort of speak, hear it from the horse's mouth. We're getting words of affirmation that the time is now, that everything is changing, that we are evolving. Like, what does that mean to you, not only as a fan, but to obviously have your son being recruited by Miami, to pretty much hear it from the top guy? There is no more reading the boards and the rumors. You're hearing it straight from the guy himself that changes are being made. What does that mean to you and the impact that brings?
Well, for me, I think it's great. It means a lot because growing up, like, you know, to my age a little bit, Michael Irvin, the Eddie Browns, all those guys. Everybody all the kids wanted to be like a Miami Hurricane. You know what I mean? Like I wanted to be a Miami Hurricane. You know what I mean? Like just having that 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 excitement that we had in the '80s. No, the U in the '80s. They even got songs with it. The U in the '80s. For me, I think that's great. And then for my son to be like one of the top recruits, which for me is amazing in itself because it kind of came out of nowhere. But man, I'm excited about what the future holds.